In the green valleys of Kentucky, where the air feels heavy and old trees stand like guardians of forgotten secrets, there once existed a place named Pleasant Hill. From a distance it appeared peaceful. Even holy rows of white buildings stood in neat lines, gardens bloomed without weeds, and silent prayers floated through the air like smoke from an unseen fire. But inside those walls, behind those locked wooden doors, something darker had taken root, something far beyond what any visitor could ever imagine founded in the year 1807. Pleasant Hill welcomed those who searched for spiritual salvation. The people who came gave everything names: land, families, identity. They embraced a life of silence, celibacy, obedience, and total detachment from the outside world. They believed they were entering a sacred space, in truth. They were stepping into a cage made of rituals. Surveillance and fear at the heart of this system stood the Richardson family. Samuel Richardson wore simple robes, spoke calmly, and always kept his eyes still. He claimed he had been chosen by disciples of Mother Ann Lee. His voice carried weight. His presence created silence. He never shouted. He never needed to. People followed him without question. He was their leader, their guide, their unseen wall. But beneath that calm mask lived a master of control. Beside him walked Martha Richardson, gentle voice, warm eyes, quiet movements. She said she had surrendered her marriage, but her relationship with Samuel continued in secret. She could look at someone for only a second and know what they feared, what they wanted, and how they could be broken. Her kindness was cold, her concern designed. Their children served like soldiers within this sacred machine. Ezekiel managed the land. He turned soil into harvest and faith into business. He sold grain, herbs, vegetables, and watched those who worked with an unblinking eye. Caleb listened, followed, remembered. He read letters before others could listen, behind walls, and never smiled. Rebecca trained the women young, old, new, broken. She taught them the rules. She erased their voices. She replaced their memories with scripts. Her words healed and sliced at the same time. Patience handled letters, documents, and records. She could write in any style. After seeing only a few lines, she forged names, created false departures, and erased people without ever leaving her desk. Jeremiah ran the workshop. He made chairs, tables, and rules. His hands built things. His eyes measured people. Isaiah moved between states with wagons full of seeds and other things. He smiled, gave handshakes, prayed in barns, and left behind silence. Hannah, sister of Martha, prepared the meals. She studied herbs. She understood which mixtures caused sleep, sickness, forgetfulness, or stillness together. They created a community where questions died quietly and obedience grew like weeds. The Richardson family did not lead by force. They led by reshaping the air itself. Slowly, gently, completely. People who entered Pleasant Hill were stripped of the world. They handed over land deeds. They surrendered letters. They burned keepsakes. They received simple clothing, strict schedules, and hollow words. They were told it was holy. They were told it was necessary. They believed it. Life followed a perfect cycle: wake before dawn, pray without sound, work without pause, eat in silence, sleep under watch. No one left. No one returned. Families outside wrote letters. They received replies in familiar handwriting. But those words had been written by patients, based on old samples, signed with names no longer living. One man. Brother Thomas Whitman arrived in the early days. He had lost his wife, children, and wealth. Pleasant Hill promised peace for 5 years. He worked, he gave everything. He became a trusted helper, but then he noticed things. Numbers did not match. Food stocks were too low for the number of members. Income from sales did not align with work output. He stood during a meeting, held up records, and asked, "Where are the missing funds? Where are the missing people?" The room froze. Samuel's hands remained folded. Martha's smile did not change, but Caleb stood from the corner. Rebecca shifted in her seat. Patience left silently that night. Thomas was found dead. They said he passed in sleep. Mary Caldwell, a young woman who cleaned. The dormitories noticed the smell of bitter almonds. His lips were blue, his papers were gone. A fire burned in the common hall that evening. Pages turned to ash under the excuse of purification. No one spoke his name again after that. New rules appeared without words. People who hesitated were sent on retreats, small cabins deep in the forest alone without witness. They were told to reflect. They never returned. The cabins had one bed, one window, one lock on the outside. Meals were delivered. Voices were not family members outside, received updates. Their loved ones were traveling, called to serve, moved to other settlements. Letters were full of hope and scripture, but those letters were lies written by Patience, reviewed by Hannah. Approved by Samuel. As time passed, disappearances became routine. Sometimes the young were sold. Isaiah traveled far, his wagons always full. He stayed in distant barns, slept under stars, returned with empty seats and clean hands. He carried forged contracts showing voluntary departure receipts, matched the state's expectations. No one looked deeper. Then came Elder Meckham in 1834, a respected Shaker from Ohio sent to evaluate Pleasant Hill, to consider it for union with other communities. He arrived with records knowledge and questions. He asked for full access. He spoke privately with members. He read the burial logs. He studied the supply lists. He asked why letters from deceased members existed. He asked why the same handwriting appeared in every document. He asked where bodies were buried. He asked why the population never changed, even though names did. The Richardsons delayed. They smiled. They offered excuses. Samuel spoke of storms that destroyed files. Martha mentioned regional customs. But Meckham pressed one night. He walked the cemetery. Moonlight revealed uneven soil markers with false dates. Graves, too, fresh shadows without names. Mary Caldwell found him. She whispered. She cried. She told him everything. They fled. That night reached Harrodsburg by dawn, met the sheriff, but the sheriff had been paid. They went higher. A federal marshal arrived. The raid began. Doors were broken. Cellars revealed captives. 37 survivors barely breathing, waiting for whatever came next. The rest were missing. Records showed hundreds. Only a few remained. Ledgers were found, names, amounts, destinations. Journals were discovered, notes on manipulation, personality profiles, obedience strategies. Martha had written every method, every weakness, every plan. The family was arrested in court. Former members spoke. Survivors described the poison, the isolation, the lies. The country listened in horror. Newspapers called Pleasant Hill a holy prison. The Richardsons were sentenced, executed in October. That same year the land was sold. The buildings were torn down. The records were sealed today. The wind still moves through those empty fields. The earth still holds names, never spoken, and the truth still waits, just beneath the grass. Would you walk there? Would you listen? If the ground whispered back, would you believe the silence? Because silence was their tool, and silence is all that remains at night when the wind falls still and the stars seem to watch without blinking. The land, where Pleasant Hill once stood, becomes quieter than silence itself. Travelers who pass near it on empty roads lower their voices without meaning to. Animals refuse to walk its paths. Birds never rest in its branches. Old men in nearby towns tell children to never follow the creek past the third bend. They say things still live there, not animals, not people, but things that were never meant to breathe fresh air. There are stories of a woman in gray, seen near the trees with no footprints behind her. Stories of bells ringing once each season, though no bell remains standing. Stories of voices calling names long forgotten, not to be heard, but to be remembered. And still the ground waits beneath roots and fallen branches, beneath leaves that rot and return. It waits. It holds the shape of every step taken in fear, every scream swallowed by faith, every prayer that ended with silence. Historians came once with cameras and journals. They left before sunset, pale and wordless. Locals never saw them again. A foundation tried to build a museum, but the equipment refused to work. Wires, melted batteries, drained blueprints vanished into ash. The project was abandoned. Now there is nothing except the air and the weight it carries. Some say it is just a field. Some say it is cursed. Some believe the system. Pleasant Hill created was not the first and will not be the last. The structure was too perfect, too adaptable, too quiet. It could take other forms, wear other faces, move without notice. Faith is powerful. When pure but unstoppable, when poisoned, truth can be rewritten. If spoken enough times, memory can be broken with kindness. Darkness does not always roar. Sometimes it prays, sometimes it smiles, and sometimes it stands behind pulpits holding scriptures, speaking softly, never raising a hand, but never letting go. Maybe somewhere far away, another name, another robe, another family, another hill, perhaps smaller, perhaps newer, but just as hollow and just as dangerous. If you ever meet someone who tells you to give away everything, to forget the past, to walk away from questions, to trust without proof, to listen without speaking, remember what you have heard here. Remember the names. Remember the numbers. Remember that 312 people were swallowed, not by war, not by disease, not by nature, but by human hands, shaped by belief, carved by control, and sealed with silence. Pleasant Hill is gone, but its pattern lives. And if you ever smell lilacs in a place where no flowers grow, leave. Do not wait, do not ask, do not pray, just run.